Okay, so now that we are pretty much done, this is kind of a bonus, but in video number 9, I want to talk about finding programmers. I'm not talking specifically about going out and finding a programmer, but I'm talking about what kind of characteristics and traits that you should be looking for within a WordPress plugin programmer, because not all programmers are going to be the same. One programmer may be knowledgeable in one area, but unless they're really knowledgeable in WordPress plugin and they've created WordPress plugins before, then you're going to want somebody who is, their skill set is that, and not somebody who is really strong in a different area. You want somebody who essentially is specialized in this area. All right. Now, a good WordPress programmer is going to need to be well versed in PHP. PHP is basically a web application programming language. You don't really need to know all that, but it's just PHP. And then MySQL, which is the database that the WordPress runs on. And PHP and MySQL actually is a program language that runs many other frameworks besides WordPress. So just keep that in mind. So they also need to be well versed in the WordPress framework, meaning they have developed WordPress plugins before. Now, they should be able to do a little design, but don't worry if they're not super fantastic on the design level. You want somebody who is strong on the programming side, more importantly. Now, I want to warn you and I want to caution you. There are tons and tons of PHP and MySQL programmers out there, but unless they have produced at least minimum 3 WordPress plugins, do not go with them, because like I said earlier, PHP and MySQL is a very common language to produce web applications. They should also be well versed in CSS3 and JavaScript. CSS is a design element which will allow them to create the user interface based on what you created earlier and make that happen and make it look nice. They should also be able to read someone else's code. What I found over the years when hiring people was that most programmers want to create a plugin from scratch. And while that is great and fine and dandy, you want somebody to have the ability to read somebody else's code. And what I mean by that is, let's say you give somebody a plugin. Let's say you find a WordPress plugin from another programmer. You buy the rights for that plugin and you want to make it better. If you find a programmer that wants to create it from scratch, that's not good. You want to find a programmer who can read somebody else's code to make it better. So there are many different approaches that you can take. You can either develop the plugin from scratch, and that's fine, or you can buy out a WordPress plugin that might not be doing as well and then make it better, but you want to find a good programmer. A good programmer is just that, somebody who can actually read somebody else's code. If not, then run, they are probably newbies. And that doesn't necessarily mean they are all newbies, but it's better to find somebody who can read somebody else's code. So whatever site you can use Upwork.com, you can use Elance.com, which I believe now is actually Upwork.com. There are other sites out there. Whatever site that you decide to use to hire your programmer, do not hire anyone who doesn't have good feedback. So you obviously need to do your due diligence, look at their profile, make sure they have really good comments, make sure that they are actually developed plugins in the past. And most of that is pretty self-explanatory. Make sure you do your due diligence. Now, another thing that I recommend that you do is it's better to work with individuals and not agencies, because when you have problems or bugs that arise, you want to have a dedicated programmer that you work one-on-one. A lot of times when you work with agencies, they will give you someone to develop your plugin, but then when you have problems, they'll give you somebody else, and it just creates a very major headache and hassle that you just don't need to deal with. So that's my recommendation to you. Hire individuals that you can work one-on-one. or individuals that you might be able to partner with and develop the plugin. So you might be the business side and the marketing side. You can partner with somebody to develop the WordPress plugin and give them a cut, like a 50% cut or whatever percentage that you decide to give. But at the end of the day, individuals are just easier to work with. And you want to think long term as well. You will want to budget the initial costs and the long-term costs. Now, what do I mean by that? This is what usually happens. If a programmer bids, let's say $600 to develop your plugin, know that in reality that it actually costs 2 times. So normally it would cost $1,200 over time to fix bugs. Yes, it might be $600 for the initial, but there are going to be bugs and it's going to take time. Also, if they say like, oh, it's going to take 2 months, normally, yes, it might take 2 months for them, but there are bugs and they're going to have to work with you to make it work. So normally I double that or even triple that amount. Sometimes it takes 4 months. Sometimes it takes triple the amount, which is 6 months. So just keep that in mind as far as budgeting goes. Most of the time, if you even see somebody that says, oh, I can do this in a week, or I can do this in 2 weeks, unless their feedback says that, I would be very, very skeptical of that. I've seen some programmers and I've hired some programmers in the past that can do it in 2 weeks, but realistically, after fixing bugs and all that, it's usually 2 or 3 months later. Very, very rarely have I seen people do it overnight. Now, like I said, Upwork.com is a good site to go to and find programmers. And always ask to see previous WordPress plugins. Make sure that they have developed programs before and plugins before. And another little thing, another little tip is make sure that they all look the same or perform the same way. So what you're looking for are patterns. I've already taught you how to find patterns in consumer demand. But if you want to figure out if somebody's legit or not, look at their plugins, see if they have a style, because everybody has a style. If you look at an artist, they all have a specific style. If you look the way you work, you have a specific style. And if they all perform within a specific style, meaning maybe they look very, very similar or they perform very similar, that's a good indication that they actually developed that program. Now, obviously, feedback is very important. That's a good indication as well if they actually know what they're doing. So at the end of the day, what I'm just saying is do your due diligence. And because the reality is that some people plagiarize, some people copy other people's plugins, and that's a great way to detect. In this day and age, I've seen so many people pretend to be programmers and copy other people's plugins just to get by, and then you realize later that you've paid this person and they've taken code from somebody else. So another thing you want to make sure to say is all of your code needs to be original. You cannot plagiarize or copy anybody else's code. All right. So with that said, congratulations again. You've reached the end of this video course. Make sure you go back, watch the videos, and make sure you actually implement everything that I've taught you to turn your idea, to design it, and now once you're done, you can give it to your programmer.